Is Donald Trump a Moses for today? Let me create a little bit of context first so that you could really understand this idea. Let's start with the Bible, where it talks about how God made a covenanted blessing with Abraham. Now, this blessing then went to Isaac, then it went to Jacob, then it went to his son Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers to the land of Egypt. Joseph went from slave to house servant to being in jail to all the way being the most powerful man in all of Egypt next to Pharaoh. The blessing of God went through Joseph onto the land of Egypt, so all of Egypt was blessed. But then some time went by. There was a new Pharaoh in town who forgot all about what Joseph had done, and he started to attack the Israelites. It's really amazing because the blessing of God was over Egypt because of the Israelites. So Pharaoh was basically trying to attack the blessing of God that was over his land. Now, this is an interesting conflict because the land of Egypt is only blessed because of the Israelites. But now that Pharaoh is attacking the Israelites, the land of Egypt can't be blessed anymore, but the Israelites are still there, so God wants them to be blessed. He just doesn't want Egypt to be blessed if they don't stop what they're doing. This is where Moses comes in, who had one of the highest positions in political office in the days of Egypt because he represented the Israelites against Pharaoh, who was the other highest person in the political positions in Egypt. Moses constantly went to Pharaoh and said, "You need to let us go." Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go, and plague after plague after plague, with each plague getting worse and each plague showing more and more that God's blessing was over the Israelites, not over the Egyptians. There was a plague where a bunch of flies filled the land, and it only showed up on the Egyptian side, not the Israelites. There was a plague where there was a bunch of boils that came out all over their bodies, and it only affected Egypt. It didn't affect the Israelites. All their livestock had died on the Egyptian side, but it didn't affect the Israelites. And then ultimately, the firstborn sons of Egypt passed away, but not on the Israelites. You see, to me, this has a lot of parallels to America because America was blessed by God because of the way that our country was originally set up. But then over the course of time, the leaders who forgot all about how the original leaders had set things up forgot about it, and now they're starting to attack the morals and values and things that people stand for that allow this nation to be blessed in the first place, just like Pharaoh had forgot about Joseph and started to attack the blessing of God over the Israelites. Trump is playing the role of Moses here because he's constantly calling out the leaders that are going against these godly morals, beliefs, and values in the ways that things should be running in America like they used to. He constantly calls them out left and right. He's been doing it since he stepped onto the political scene, which is very interesting because Moses kind of came out of nowhere and stepped on the political scene as well. After he came out of the wilderness, Donald Trump came out of nowhere and stepped on the political scene, and he's been calling them out left and right and saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, you got to do this, you got to do that, but they're not doing it. They just keep on saying we're not going to do it, and now plagues are happening to the land. Well, what kind of plagues? Well, we're not energy independent anymore. We're running out of reserves, so that is somewhat of a famine. We've had food shortages already. That is somewhat of a famine. Inflation is keeps on getting higher and higher and higher, which shows that that's not a blessing of any kind. Depression rates are through the roof. Suicide rates are through the roof. Divorce rates are through the roof. Kids are getting indoctrinated with all sorts of bad things, and that's causing a lot of different challenges in their life as they get older. It's even having global impacts like we see in Russia and Ukraine, in China and Taiwan, and now in Israel and Palestine. Now, eventually, you see that Pharaoh, which would represent the enemy in this story, eventually can't take it anymore, and he tells the Israelites that they can actually leave, and there's this wealth transfer because the Egyptians hand over their money to the Israelites on their way out the door. But then they regret it, and they pursue them all the way into the Red Sea, but it's a trap for them. God is setting them up with a trap. They all get into the Red Sea. The Israelites get across, but the Egyptians get swallowed up by the Red Sea in this ultimate show of God's justice over the land. This ultimate show of who God stands with and who he doesn't stand with. This parallels in so many different ways of other videos that I've done related to the Red Sea and how we have this season of exposing where the waves are on each side as a representation of exposure. And then at the right time, the exposure drops fully onto the enemy. And that is symbolic of the justice. And that's the season that we're going into next. It's a very exciting thing. And that is why Trump is a Moses, because he is the one that is leading the people out of this wicked ways of doing things.